Good morning, Grace Church, Grace family, Grace friends. Thank you for joining us for another Monday morning motivation. I am so incredibly honored to be given the opportunity to sit here and speak with you all this morning on a topic that I believe is very important and imperative that we as Christians have a grasp and a concept of, and that is the concept of praise and worship, and not just worship, but true worship, because that is what God has required of us, and how to offer God true worship. So, in beginning this devotion, I'm going to take you to Romans 12:1. And that scripture says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Now, if you would look at that scripture, that word service, translated in Greek, it actually means worship. So, worship is the act of offering ourselves to God every day as a living sacrifice. So, worship is a living experience. It's 24/7. It's every single day. It's this practice of offering ourselves as a living sacrifice that is holy and acceptable to God. So, in knowing that, our worship should never end. Our worship should be continual because we should never stop offering ourselves to God. So when we come to church, when we gather together, and when we praise, and when we lift our hands, and when we run, and when we jump, that is just an overflow of what should already be occurring in our lives every single day. But here's the thing with God is that you can't offer God what you think He deserves. You have to offer God what He's required of us. And the thing that God has required of us is true worship. So now the question is, okay, well, how do I offer God true worship? So, in answering that question, I'm going to take you to the book of Psalms, Psalms 95:10. And this scripture, it's actually in reference to the children of Israel. And the children of Israel had a very miraculous experience with God. They were in bondage for hundreds of years, and God sent Moses to the children of Israel, and He delivered them out of bondage, and He parted the Red Sea, and He fed them manna from heaven every day. So the children of Israel had a very miraculous experience with God. But the thing with the children of Israel is that they praised God for what He did. But Moses worshiped God because of what he knew. In Psalms 95:10 it says, 40 years long was I grieved with this generation, and said, it is a people that do err in their heart, and they have not known my ways. So the children of Israel knew His works. They experienced it every single day. But Moses knew His ways. So worship, this concept of worship comes from what you know. You have to have a spiritual insight into who God is. You have to study God in an effort to not just see parts of Him and certain aspects of Him, but to see God in His whole entirety. So, because if we have this small sense of who God is, then how do you think our worship's going to be? Because worship is determined by our grasp of God's greatness. Our praise and our thanksgiving, that is directed towards God's performance. But our worship, that has to do with God's nature. So We have to study God in order to see Him clearly. Because worship is the result of divine revelation. And that revelation is required in order to birth true worship. And the thing is that if you try to go around that, if you try to cancel out that revelation of knowing who God is, then you automatically cancel out true worship. And when you no longer have true worship, then what are you left with? You're left with movement. You're left with movement but no maturity. Without true worship, you have activity, but there's no spirituality. Without revelation and without true worship, you can have religious services, but you're not building anything of eternal value. True worship and revelation of who God is in His entirety is the difference maker in saints that cannot wait to get in God's presence versus people who will find any excuse to stay home. So, my challenge to you today, tomorrow, the rest of the week, my challenge to you would be to start talking to God and praying and asking Him, God, reveal yourself to me. I don't want to just see you in these small aspects of who you are, because I know that I know that you've blessed me abundantly. You've blessed my family abundantly. You've provided for us exponentially, especially during this pandemic that we're living in. I know all these things about you, God. I know you're a provider, and I know that you can do all these things, but I don't just want to know what you can do, but I want to have a revelation of who you are. I challenge you to talk to God. Let that be your prayer, because He's already promised us that if we seek after Him with our whole hearts, that He will be found of us. So talk to God and ask Him to begin to reveal who He is to you in His entirety and in His whole being. I hope that you've enjoyed this Monday morning devotion. We are continually praying for all of you. We're praying for the blessings of God on you and on your home. Thanks for joining us this morning. We love you guys. Have a blessed Monday.